Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hello everybody and welcome to Unseen Beauty, and today we're going to talk about saying when you think something is a really bad idea, because it happens, you're with colleagues or in a meeting and somebody says something and you think you can't be serious, that's a really bad idea. Sometimes you might want to say that, it might be appropriate to do so, but other times, for example if you're in a meeting, that would just be unhelpful because the other person would feel bad, they might look bad in front of everyone else, or they might feel that you're not taking them seriously or listening to them, or really that's just a way to end the conversation, isn't it? Your idea is terrible, where do you go from there? So one way that some English speakers try to deal with this problem is to try and be really polite and not say what they mean and hope that the other person understands. And I don't think this is a good strategy, because there will always be people who don't realize that you're actually really politely saying no. So I think there's somewhere where you have to be clear enough so that people understand you, but also not so rude that you just shut down any further conversation or discussion around the topic. So what I mean by being overly polite is when people say, oh yeah, that's really interesting, and they don't mean that, they mean that's crazy, why do you even think that would work? Or they say things like, oh yeah, I'll think about it, when the way they say it and the way they won't commit to really thinking about it means they're never going to think about it. They've already dismissed the idea and moved on. So I don't think that's particularly helpful. But I found I've got here 5 constructive ways to say that you don't think something's a good idea, but that leaves room for further discussion to find another idea, or that doesn't make the first person feel terrible afterwards. So the first one is acknowledge something good about the idea before you go on to point out why it won't work. So if somebody has an idea that will save time, you think, yeah, that would save time, and that's a good thing, but it would cost too much, so that's why we can't do it. And then you can say, well, yeah, I can see why you want to do this, but what would we do about, and then maybe introduce something that they haven't thought of before. Because if you dismiss the idea straight away, well then that's the end of the discussion. But if you say, well yeah, that could work, but how about this problem? Have you thought about what we could do about that? Then it's showing that you do have concerns, but you haven't just dismissed the idea straight away. And maybe things that the other person doesn't. Like when I used to work on the web team, people wanted me to do things to their pages that I knew that wouldn't work, because then it wouldn't be in line with the way that the rest of the site was, or what they wanted with the setup that we had wasn't possible. So whilst it might seem like a good idea, I knew that practically it wouldn't work. And maybe you have skills that the other person making the idea doesn't have, or maybe you work in the finance department, so you know how the finance data is stored and gathered, but what somebody wants isn't in line with that. So you may have extra information that they don't know when they're thinking they have this brilliant idea. So if you give reasons for why you don't think something will work, then it's easier for the other person to accept that. Like, instead of just saying, no, we're not doing that, if you say, no, we're not doing that because, and then you give a reason that they can understand that's got nothing to do with emotions or them as an individual, but like a practical reason that anybody can follow. They still may not like it, they might not agree with you, but giving somebody a reason that they can understand for why you think something won't work or why you don't want to do something is actually better, because it's making it objective rather than subjective about emotions and what you think of them as a person and how good you think they are at doing their job. Okay, so the next thing that you can do is to ask for more details. So instead of giving an outright no, you're already thinking, I can see this is going to end badly, this just won't work. You could ask the other person to explain a bit more about how they're going to do it, or where the resources will come from, or who is going to do this amazing thing. And then when they start talking about it, when they start really thinking about it, maybe they'll come to the conclusion themselves that, yeah, maybe this wasn't the best idea they ever had. So people are different. Like some people will really think about something and think about all the possible problems and how they would fix them and then share the idea. I tend to be a bit like that, but other people aren't. They have an idea and they want to share it straight away because they feel excited about it, and those people may still have good ideas, but they haven't gone through the stage where you think about the problems and how you would fix them. And maybe you need to help them with that. If that's something you're good at, then you may find yourself doing a lot more of that, because that's not something that everybody thinks about. But if you try to engage the other person in a conversation in terms of thinking about, yeah, how would we do this then? Okay, this is the plan. How would we deal with those problems? Then they start to see, okay, yeah, this sounded good at the beginning, but maybe it isn't. So you possibly don't even have to tell them that their idea won't work, because they might work it out for themselves as soon as you start to talk about some of the possible problems. Number 3, ask for other opinions. So like if the whole room doesn't think something will work, it's kind of shared out between all of you and not just you saying no, no, no. You know, if other people can say, yeah, I'm concerned about that as well, because, you know, you can broaden out the discussion. That isn't always possible. If somebody comes to you with an idea, then that doesn't always work. But if it's something in a meeting situation, then that can help as well. And maybe the more people you have, maybe somebody will have an idea about how you can slightly change this idea or use it as a starting point for another idea. So the initial idea isn't completely dismissed out of hand, it's just adapted and changed and improved until you've got something that you can work with. Number 4, remember that it's about the idea and not the person. Even if the person is super annoying, try to stick to the fact that it's about the idea, and so the person doesn't feel like, oh, you're always not listening to me, or you never do what I suggest, or, you know, if you can keep it about facts and not about the person, whether or not you like the person, it does make it easier to keep an objective discussion. And number 5, we've kind of touched on this, but give a reason that the other person can understand. And I've made this a separate point because it's not just give a reason, because that is important, but give a reason that the other person can understand. So if the other person doesn't understand how your department works, for example, or some of the terminology that you use every day, then don't just give them an explanation that makes no sense to them, because all they will take from that is, oh, you just talked a load of words and I still don't know why you don't want to do what I've suggested. But if you can, you may have to simplify it if they're not working in the same area as you, or if they don't have the same knowledge. Make it, I don't mean make it childish, but make it something that they can relate to and something that they will be able to understand, so that, again, they may not agree, but at least you did your best to explain why it wouldn't work. And I mean, sometimes the answer just has to be no. No, that is just far too expensive for the benefits that we would get from it. Or no, we don't have the budget for that. Or no, we don't have the people to do that. You know, that would be a nice thing to do, but we just don't have the staff at the moment. Sometimes it just has to be no. But as long as, if you can say no, but, then it does make it easier. So yeah, you may not be everyone's favourite person, and sometimes, particularly if you're in a position of authority, a manager, a team leader, business owner, you're going to have to say no to things. You'll never please everybody all the time, and what somebody thinks is a great idea because it's their idea may not be good for the company or good for the rest of the people in the company. So yeah, you will have to have these discussions sometimes, but I hope that these ideas have given you something else to think about in terms of how to phrase it in a way that is a bit more that gives a better explanation, and that makes it easier for the other person to understand, rather than just saying no, don't want to. So hope that was useful. If you want to read this article, this is actually based on an article that I wrote on the blog, so if you go to the show notes page, which is englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 127, then you'll find it there. I'll link through to it. Also remember that there you can use the contact form if there's anything you want to share with me about the podcast. English with Kirsty has a coffee button, so if you want to support the podcast, then look for the coffee cup. And also I have another podcast if anyone's interested in that. It's not about learning English, it's something completely different. It's about beauty and lifestyle, and a lot about kind of beauty and skincare products, but also about animals and travel, and basically it's based on my beauty and lifestyle blog. So if you're interested in that, look for Unseen Beauty wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find that. I published a couple of episodes this week. I've also had there are some previous episodes. I had a bit of a break, but I'm back with that now. So if you want another podcast, then look out for Unseen Beauty wherever you get your podcasts. And I hope you have a good week. Have fun learning English, and I'll be back again next week. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.